The fluorescent lights in the restricted seventh floor wing of St. Mercy Hospital buzz with a frequency that makes my teeth ache, a sound I have grown accustomed to over 18 months of night shifts, but never quite learned to ignore. My sneakers squeak against the polished linoleum as I approach the nurse's station, the hallway stretching before me in that peculiar stillness that belongs only to hospitals after dark, when the living sleep and the dying keep their lonely vigil. Charge Nurse Patterson looks up from her charts, her reading glasses perched low on her nose, and I know immediately that something is different tonight by the way her mouth tightens at the corners. "Emma," she says, and my stomach drops because that tone never precedes good news. "You are assigned to 707 tonight. Room 707. The restricted suite at the end of the corridor. The one with armed guards stationed outside like sentries at a fortress. The one we whisper about during breaks but never discuss in any official capacity. I have walked past that room dozens of times, always averting my eyes from the men in dark suits who stand motionless by the door, always wondering what kind of patient requires that level of security. Patterson slides a thin file across the desk, and when I open it, half the pages are blacked out, redacted, words and sentences disappearing under thick lines of permanent marker. Alexander Sinclair, 34 years old, comatose for 3 weeks following a gunshot wound to the chest and head. The medical details are sparse, his history non-existent, just warnings in red ink about unauthorized visitors and protocols for emergencies. My hands are already trembling as I gather supplies, loading my cart with IV bags and medication, syringes and monitoring equipment, all the ordinary tools of my profession that suddenly feel inadequate for whatever waits behind that door. The guards watch me approach with flat, assessing eyes, and the taller one checks my badge twice before stepping aside, his hand resting casually on something beneath his jacket that I do not want to identify. The door swings open with a hydraulic sigh, and I step into a room that looks more like a luxury hotel suite than a hospital space. All dark wood and soft lighting, and a massive window overlooking the city lights below. But it is the man in the bed who steals every thought from my mind. He is beautiful, even unconscious, even with tubes snaking from his arms and monitors beeping their steady rhythm. Alexander Sinclair is the most striking man I have ever seen. Sharp cheekbones and a strong jaw darkened with stubble, black hair slightly too long, falling across a forehead that would be aristocratic if not for the violence written in the scar bisecting his left eyebrow. His body is lean and muscular beneath the thin hospital gown, and as I begin my assessment, I catalog more scars, a constellation of violence across his ribs, his shoulder, his abdomen, each one telling a story I am not sure I want to know. I check his vitals with hands that have steadied now that I am working, falling into the familiar routine of nursing. And I talk to him softly as I prepare his medications, because that is what I was taught, that coma patients can sometimes hear, that voices can be anchors in the dark. I tell him my name, tell him I will be taking care of him tonight, my voice barely above a whisper in the quiet room. As I lean close to check his pupils with my pen light, his hand twitches. Just once. Just enough to make my heart slam against my ribs. I freeze, watching, waiting, but he remains still. Muscle reflex, I tell myself. Nothing more. Just an involuntary movement. But my hands shake as I finish documenting his status. And I cannot shake the feeling that something has shifted, that the man before me is not as far away as his closed eyes suggest. Now please take a moment and subscribe to our channel and comment where you are watching from and what time is it. It is always fascinating to see where these stories get all around the world. Thank you. I settle into the chair beside Alexander's bed and pull up his chart on the tablet, scrolling through the sparse information that tells me almost nothing about the man lying motionless before me. The file is a study in redaction, black bars obscuring more than they reveal, and the warnings are repeated in bold red text at the top of every page. No unauthorized visitors, no exceptions. Contact security immediately if anyone attempts entry. Notify Dr. Reeves directly of any status changes. I glance up at the window that looks out into the hallway and see two men standing there, both in suits that probably cost more than 3 months of my rent, both watching the room with an intensity that makes my skin prickle. They are not hospital security. Hospital security wears uniforms and looks bored. These men look like coiled springs, like violence waiting for an excuse. I turn my attention back to my patient, checking the IV drip, adjusting the flow rate, monitoring the numbers that scroll across the screens beside his bed. His vitals are stable, strong even, his heart beating with a steady rhythm that seems at odds with the stillness of his body. I should stay silent. I should perform my duties efficiently and professionally, and leave this room as quickly as possible. But I have spent 18 months talking to comatose patients, filling the silence with my voice, because some study somewhere suggested it might help, and the habit is too ingrained to break now. So I talk. I tell him about my day, about the traffic on the expressway that made me 10 minutes late, about the coffee I spilled on my scrubs in the parking garage, about the student loan payment that cleared my account this morning and left me with $47 until next Friday. I tell him about my apartment, the tiny studio in a neighborhood that is trying hard to gentrify but has not quite made it yet, about my neighbor who plays bass guitar at 2 in the morning, about the radiator that clanks like a ghost is trapped inside it. My voice is soft, barely above a whisper, and I am acutely aware of how ridiculous this is, talking to a stranger about my mundane problems, while he lies there fighting his way back from whatever darkness has claimed him. His face is impossibly beautiful in the dim light, all sharp angles and shadows, the kind of face that artists would want to capture, masculine and harsh, and somehow elegant at the same time. I wonder what his voice sounds like. I wonder what kind of man he is when he is awake, when those eyes open and that mind engages. What did he do to end up here? What kind of life requires armed guards and redacted files? I reach out to adjust his blanket, tucking it more securely around his shoulders, and his fingers curl. Not a twitch this time. A deliberate movement. Slow, purposeful. My breath catches in my throat and I watch his hand, waiting to see if it happens again. Nothing. But I am certain now. Something is changing. I should call Dr. Reeves immediately. Protocol demands it. But I check my watch and see it is 2 in the morning, and I know Dr. Reeves is in the surgical wing dealing with an emergency appendectomy, and I make a decision that is probably against every rule in my contract. I will monitor him closely. I will watch for more changes, and if anything significant happens, I will call immediately. I pull my chair closer to the bed and open my documentation, fingers poised over the keyboard, and I do not take my eyes off Alexander Sinclair's face. The next hour passes in a blur of clinical observation and mounting tension as I watch Alexander Sinclair with the focus of a scientist studying an unpredictable reaction, my pen poised over the chart to document every microscopic change in his condition. His breathing shifts first, deepening and then becoming irregular, the pattern breaking from the steady rhythm that has characterized the past 3 weeks into something more erratic, more human. I lean forward, checking the oxygen saturation on the monitor, and the numbers are good, better than good actually, climbing toward normal ranges that suggest his body is fighting its way back to consciousness. His eyelids flutter, once, twice. Rapid movements beneath the thin skin that make my heart kick against my ribs, because this is it. This is the moment every coma patient's family prays for, the return, the awakening. I should call Dr. Reeves now. Protocol screams at me to pick up the phone and summon the attending physician immediately. But my hand is frozen, hovering over the call button, because I cannot look away from Alexander's face as his features shift from the blank serenity of unconsciousness into something more animate, more present. His fingers flex against the blanket, both hands now, deliberate movements that have nothing to do with involuntary reflexes. I am on my feet, moving closer to the bed, my training taking over as I prepare to assess his neurological status, checking that the airway is clear, that the IV lines are secure. His eyes snap open. Dark eyes, nearly black in the dim light, disoriented and wild and intensely, utterly focused on me. I freeze. Every muscle in my body locks as those eyes find mine and hold with a force that feels physical, a weight pressing against my chest. His hand shoots out faster than should be possible for someone emerging from a 3-week coma, his fingers wrapping around my wrist, not painfully but firmly, with a strength that makes my breath catch in my throat. Where am I? His voice is rough, damaged from disuse, each word scraping out like gravel over broken glass. Who are you? What day is it? I try to find my voice, try to remember my training, try to become the professional nurse who has handled dozens of post-coma patients with calm efficiency. You are in St. Mercy Hospital, I manage, my words tumbling over each other. You have been unconscious. I am Emma Thornhill, your nurse. You were shot. You have been in a coma for 3 weeks. His eyes scan my face with unnerving focus, taking in every detail, every feature, as if memorizing me or searching for something he cannot quite name. I can see him processing information, see the intelligence behind those dark eyes working through confusion toward clarity. I should step back. I should call for help. But I am caught in his grip and in his gaze, unable to move as he pulls me closer with surprising strength. I open my mouth to protest, to explain that he needs to stay calm, that I need to assess his condition, but the words die unspoken because his other hand comes up to cup the back of my head, and then he is kissing me. Hard, desperate. His mouth crushes against mine with a force born of pure need. As if he is drowning and I am air, as if he needs to confirm through touch and taste that he is alive, that this is real, that he has returned from whatever darkness has held him. I am shocked into absolute stillness, unable to process what is happening, unable to respond or resist. The kiss lasts only seconds, but feels infinite, his lips demanding and fierce against mine, and then he releases me as abruptly as he grabbed me, collapsing back against the pillows, his eyes rolling back, his body going limp as unconsciousness reclaims him like a tide pulling him under. I stumble backward from the bed, my hand flying to my lips as if I can somehow contain what just happened, erase it, rewind time to before his mouth pressed against mine with that desperate, drowning intensity. My heart is hammering so hard I can hear it in my ears, a frantic percussion that drowns out the steady beep of the monitors. And I am shaking, my entire body trembling like I have been struck by lightning. Did that just happen? The question loops through my mind even as the evidence burns on my lips, the pressure of his mouth still imprinted there, impossible to deny. I should report this immediately. Protocol demands it. A patient kissed me. A comatose patient woke up and kissed me, and then lost consciousness again. And this is exactly the kind of incident that requires documentation, a report to the attending physician, a formal accounting of events. But what would I say? How would I explain it? He woke up disoriented and grabbed me and kissed me before collapsing back into unconsciousness. And no, the guards outside did not see anything. And no, I did not call for help. And yes, I was alone with him against every safety protocol we have. I force myself to move, to step back to the bed, to check his vitals with hands that will not stop shaking. Everything is stable. His heart rate is strong and steady. His oxygen saturation is good. His breathing has returned to the deep, regular pattern of unconsciousness. He appears exactly as he did an hour ago, as if the past 3 minutes never happened, as if he never opened those dark eyes and stared into me and pulled me close. The kiss felt like a drowning man gasping for air. Nothing romantic, nothing tender. Pure survival instinct, a desperate confirmation of life, of breath, of existence. I tell myself this even as my lips still tingle, even as something low in my stomach twists with a sensation I do not want to examine. It meant nothing. He was not conscious of what he was doing. He probably will not even remember it when he wakes again. If he wakes again. I pull up the chart on the tablet and begin documenting his brief emergence from the coma, my fingers moving over the keys with clinical precision. Patient exhibited signs of consciousness at 03:14 hours. Eyes opened. Verbal response present, but confused. Patient oriented to person and place with difficulty. Brief period of agitation followed by return to unconscious state. Duration approximately 2 minutes. I omit the kiss. The words will not form. I cannot type them. The guards outside notice nothing. They are still standing in the hallway, still watching with that coiled alertness, completely unaware that anything significant happened in this room. I finish my documentation and then I finish my shift in a daze, moving through the remaining hours on autopilot, checking the other patients in the wing, administering medications, recording vitals, all while unable to stop thinking about those dark eyes locking onto mine with such fierce intensity. At home in my tiny studio, as gray dawn light filters through the thin curtains, I cannot sleep. I lie on my bed, still in my scrubs, and pull out my phone and type Alexander Sinclair into the search bar. The results are sparse. A few mentions in business journals, vague references to import and export holdings, a tasteful website for Sinclair Enterprises that tells me absolutely nothing. I try deeper searches, variations of his name, adding terms like criminal and mafia and crime family, but the results require access I do not have, databases I cannot penetrate. I know he is dangerous. The guards, the redacted file, the gunshot wound that put him in that bed. Everything screams danger. I should request a different patient assignment. I should tell the head nurse I am not comfortable continuing his care. I should protect myself. But even as I think it, I know I will not. I return for my next shift with a speech rehearsed in my mind, professional phrases about patient boundaries and appropriate reassignment that will protect both Alexander Sinclair and myself from whatever dangerous current has started flowing between us. But when I arrive at the nurse's station and sign in, Karen, the head nurse, looks up at me with an expression I cannot quite read, something between curiosity and concern, and she says Mr. Sinclair specifically requested you. The words hit me like a physical blow. Requested, which means he has been awake, which means everything has changed. Panic and curiosity war within me, two opposing forces tearing me in different directions, and I want to ask Karen what he said, how he seemed, whether he mentioned what happened when he first woke, but I cannot form the questions without revealing too much. I nod and take the assignment sheet and walk down the corridor toward room 707 with my heart in my throat, each step feeling like walking toward something inevitable and possibly catastrophic. The guards are still outside, but they look at me differently now, with a kind of acknowledgement that makes my skin prickle, as if I have been elevated from invisible hospital staff to someone worthy of notice. I push open the door and enter, and there he is. Alexander is sitting up in bed, no longer lost in the gray space of unconsciousness, but fully present, still connected to monitors but alert in a way that transforms him entirely. He watches me enter with those same intense dark eyes, tracking my movement across the room, and his voice when he speaks is stronger now, no longer rough with disuse, but commanding and certain. You. He says it like a statement of fact, not a question, as if my presence here was inevitable, as if he has been waiting specifically for me and no one else would do. I force myself into professional mode, maintaining careful distance as I introduce myself formally, even though we both know he already knows exactly who I am. I am Emma Thornhill, your nurse. How are you feeling today? He ignores my questions completely, his gaze never leaving my face. You were here when I woke up. It is not a question. I freeze, my hands tightening on the tablet I am carrying. You talked to me before. I heard you. Every night. The words strip away every defense I have constructed, leaving me exposed and vulnerable because I did not realize anyone could hear me during those long night shifts when I filled the silence with my rambling thoughts about student loans and my tiny apartment and the weather and nothing important at all. I try to find my voice. That is therapeutic practice. Studies show that coma patients respond to familiar voices. It helps with recovery. The explanation sounds hollow even to my own ears. Alexander does not look convinced. He shifts in the bed, wincing slightly, and I move forward instinctively to check his IV line, to do something useful with my hands. But he catches my wrist, not roughly but deliberately, stopping me. Why did you talk to a stranger in a coma about your life? About things that mattered. I swallow hard, trapped by his grip and his gaze. Because I thought you could not hear me. The honesty escapes before I can stop it. He does not look away. He looks at me like I am a puzzle he intends to solve, like he has all the time in the world to take me apart piece by piece until he understands exactly what I am made of, and I have never felt so thoroughly seen in my entire life. The door opens with a sharp knock, and Dr. Mehta enters with his usual brisk efficiency, his tablet already in hand, his attention focused on the monitors displaying Alexander's vitals, and the tension that has been winding tighter and tighter between Alexander and me snaps suddenly, releasing me from the weight of his gaze. I step back quickly, perhaps too quickly, creating professional distance as I murmur something about checking on other patients, and I escape into the hallway with my heart still racing, my mind replaying his words over and over. I heard you. Every night. Over the following nights, I am assigned to remain his primary night nurse, a decision that comes from administration without explanation, and I care for Alexander as he recovers with a speed that surprises even Dr. Mehta. He is a difficult patient in ways I did not anticipate. He refuses pain medication, insisting he needs his mind clear. He demands his phone and his laptop, conducting business from his hospital bed with a focus that seems impossible for someone who was comatose days ago. He argues with doctors about his treatment plan, questioning everything, accepting nothing at face value. The guards who were outside his room are now inside, two men who stand with military precision and watch everything with eyes that never rest, and Alexander treats them with casual authority, giving orders with barely a glance, expecting immediate obedience and receiving it. But he watches me constantly. I feel his gaze tracking my movements as I check his IV, as I record his vitals, as I adjust his bed, or bring him water, or perform any of the dozen small tasks that fill my shifts. I try to remain professional, keeping my tone neutral and my distance appropriate, but his presence fills the room in a way that makes professionalism feel like a costume I am wearing badly. He asks me questions, personal questions that have nothing to do with his care. Where does she live? Does she have family? Why does she work nights instead of days? I deflect, turning every question back to his recovery, asking about his pain levels or his appetite or whether he needs anything, but he sees through my evasions with an ease that unsettles me. On my fourth night caring for him since he fully woke, as I am preparing to leave at the end of my shift, he catches my wrist again, but this time his touch is gentle, his fingers circling my pulse point with a tenderness that stops my breath. Thank you. His voice is low, meant only for me despite the guards standing 10 feet away. For talking to me. When I was lost in that darkness, your voice was the only thing that felt real. It brought me back. I do not know what to say. The vulnerability in his admission cracks something inside me, some wall I have been trying to maintain, and I find myself looking into his eyes and seeing not the dangerous man with armed guards and redacted files, but someone who was alone and afraid and clinging to the sound of a stranger's voice like a lifeline. Over the following nights, I begin to see beyond the dangerous exterior that Alexander presents to the world, beyond the armed guards and the encrypted phone calls, and the way men twice his age defer to him with barely concealed fear. He is intelligent in a way that surprises me, reading constantly from a stack of books that appears on his bedside table, everything from philosophy to history to novels I loved in college, and when I mention recognizing one of the titles, he looks at me with genuine interest, and we talk about it for 20 minutes, debating themes and character motivations like we are in some seminar room instead of a guarded hospital room where he is recovering from an assassination attempt. He conducts business via encrypted calls in languages I do not speak, his voice shifting from the careful gentleness he uses with me to something cold and absolute when he gives orders. And I learn through fragments of conversation and things the guards let slip that he has been the target of a rival organization, that the shooting that left him comatose for 3 weeks was not random violence, but a deliberate attempt to eliminate him, and that he should be in witness protection or hiding somewhere far from the city, but he refuses with a stubbornness that seems suicidal. His enemies will come for him again. Everyone knows this. I should be terrified by this knowledge, by the understanding that the man I am caring for lives in a world where people solve problems with bullets and where loyalty is enforced with violence. But instead, I find myself drawn to him in ways that defy every rational thought. We talk during my shifts, real conversations that stretch into hours when his vitals are stable and the night is quiet, and there is nothing to do but sit in the dim light and let words fill the space between us. He asks about my life with a focus that makes me feel like I am the only person who exists in his world during those moments. And I tell him about nursing school and the crushing weight of student debt that will follow me for decades, about my absent father who left when I was 8 and never looked back, about my mother who died 2 years ago from cancer that we could not afford to treat properly. And he listens with complete attention, as if my ordinary struggles and small griefs matter as much as whatever empires he controls outside these walls. I ask what he does, what business requires armed guards and encrypted phones and files so redacted they tell me nothing, and he smiles darkly, the expression transforming his face into something beautiful and dangerous. Nothing you should be involved with. The warning is clear, deliberate, a line he is drawing between us even as everything else about our interactions erases boundaries. Emma knows she should heed it, should request reassignment and walk away from whatever this is before it consumes her. But she does not. And when her shift ends and she walks out into the gray morning, she already knows she will return tonight and every night after because leaving has stopped being an option somewhere along the way. 1 week after waking, Alexander is strong enough to walk, and Dr. Mehta clears him for supervised movement around the room, and I am the one who assists him the first time he stands without support, acutely aware of his body against mine as he leans on me more than he probably needs to, the lean muscle and controlled strength evident even through the hospital gown, the heat of his skin burning through the thin fabric where my hand rests against his back. He moves with the careful precision of someone assessing their own limits, testing each step, and I watch him reclaim his body from the weakness that has held him captive, seeing the transformation from patient to something far more dangerous happening right before my eyes. Dr. Mehta tells him he can be discharged in 3 days, against medical advice, of course, because Alexander refuses to stay longer despite the protests about infection risk and the need for continued monitoring. And I realize with a strange hollow feeling in my chest that I will never see him again after he walks out of this hospital. I tell myself this is good, safe, the natural end to something that should never have begun, because he is a criminal with enemies who shoot him in broad daylight, and I am a nurse with student loans and a tiny apartment and a life that has no space for armed guards and encrypted phones and men who live in a world where violence is currency. Our worlds do not overlap. They cannot overlap. I repeat this to myself as I help him back to bed, as I check his vitals one more time, as I prepare to leave at the end of my shift, but the words feel hollow even in my own mind. That night, I am barely an hour into my shift when the alarms start blaring through the hospital, the sharp, urgent sound that means something catastrophic is happening, and my training kicks in immediately as I move toward the hallway to assess the situation. But then I hear it, the unmistakable crack of gunshots echoing from somewhere below us, from the lobby maybe or the main entrance, and my blood turns to ice. The 2 guards in Alexander's room move instantly into defensive positions, weapons appearing in their hands with professional speed, and Alexander is on his feet in one fluid motion, all trace of recovering patient gone, replaced by something lethal and focused, and he is the predator I always suspected existed beneath the careful politeness he showed me. He crosses the room in 3 strides and grabs my arm, his grip firm and unyielding. "Come with me. Now." His voice is absolute command, no room for argument, but I hesitate anyway because my training is screaming at me that I should be helping evacuate patients, helping the injured, doing my job, not running. One of the guards speaks urgently into his radio, then looks at Alexander with an expression that makes my stomach drop. "They found you. We have to move. Sir, they are coming up the stairwell." Alexander's grip on my arm tightens almost painfully, and he pulls me toward him, his other hand coming up to cup my face, forcing me to meet his eyes. "I will not leave her here." His words are directed at the guard, but his gaze is locked on mine. If they know about me, they know about her. Anyone who has been close to me is a target. Do you understand, Emma? They have been watching. They know you are my nurse. Emma's blood runs cold as the implications crash over her. The understanding that simply doing her job, simply talking to a lonely man in a coma, simply existing in his orbit has marked her as something to be used against him. And why would she matter? Why would killing a nurse mean anything to a man like Alexander Sinclair? Unless he gave them reason to think she mattered. Unless his protection of her, his attention, his focus, made her valuable in the brutal calculus of his world. Alexander pulls me into the corridor and the world has transformed into chaos. Nurses running with patients in wheelchairs, doctors shouting orders, the alarm still screaming its mechanical warning. And somewhere below us, the gunfire continues in sporadic bursts that make my heart slam against my ribs with each crack of sound. Staff are evacuating toward the north stairwell, the designated emergency route. But Alexander is dragging me in the opposite direction, toward the service corridors that only maintenance and supply staff use, and every instinct in my body is screaming at me to stop, to help, to do my job because I can see an elderly patient struggling to get out of bed through an open doorway and a nurse I recognize from orientation looking panicked as she tries to disconnect an IV. I pull against Alexander's grip, trying to stop, trying to go back. There are people who need help. I cannot just leave them. He rounds on me so fast I stumble backward into the wall, and his face is transformed into something terrifying. All the careful gentleness he showed me in room 707 burned away to reveal the predator underneath. "They will kill you to hurt me." His voice is low and absolute. "Do you understand, Emma? Anyone connected to me becomes a target. Anyone who matters. And you have been my nurse for 2 weeks, sitting with me every night, talking to me, touching me, and they have been watching the whole time because that is what they do. They watch and they wait and they find the weaknesses. You are my weakness now." The words hit me like physical blows as I realized the enormity of my danger, the understanding that I did nothing wrong. I followed hospital protocol. I did my job with compassion and professionalism. I talked to a lonely man in a coma because that is what I was trained to do. And now I am marked as something to be used against him, a piece in a game I did not know I was playing. We reach the stairwell, and 2 of his men are already there, the guards from his room, and they flank us immediately as we start descending, their weapons drawn and ready, and the descent is rapid and controlled, Alexander keeping one hand locked around my wrist as if he is afraid I will bolt. My mind races with horrible possibilities spinning out in every direction. My apartment with its cheap lock that I sometimes forget to engage. My neighbors, the elderly couple next door who always smile at me in the hallway. The single mother across the hall with her 2 young children. Are they in danger too simply because they live near me? Will someone come looking for me there? Alexander seems to read my thoughts because he pulls me closer as we reach the landing between floors. "We will protect you, Emma, I promise. Everyone you care about will be watched, guarded, kept safe until this is over." His certainty should be comforting, but instead it terrifies me further because it means he has already thought this through, already calculated the reach of the danger. We burst through the door into the underground parking garage, and the air is thick with exhaust and the smell of oil, and somewhere an engine is already running. A black SUV sits waiting with its doors open and another armed man at the wheel, and Alexander pushes me inside with a hand on my head to keep me from hitting the frame, sliding in beside me immediately. And before my door is even fully closed, the vehicle is moving, tires squealing against concrete as we speed toward the exit ramp. I twist around to look back at the hospital through the rear window, and I can see emergency lights reflecting off the buildings, police cars arriving, and somewhere in there my coworkers are still evacuating patients and dealing with whatever horror has unfolded in the lobby, and I am running away when I should be helping. The sirens wail behind us as we emerge onto the street and disappear into the city night. The SUV races through the city streets, and I sit rigid against the leather seat, trying to process everything that has happened in the span of 20 minutes, my mind unable to catch up with the reality that I have fled my workplace, abandoned my patients, left behind my entire life because men with guns came looking for the man sitting beside me. Alexander is on his phone speaking in clipped tones that sound like commands, coordinating something I cannot fully understand. Words like perimeter, and secure the secondary location, and sweep the area. And I realize he is orchestrating an entire operation while I sit here shaking and useless. The city blurs past the tinted windows, familiar streets transformed into something threatening now that I understand I am being hunted, and every car that passes too close makes my heart jump into my throat. I finally find my voice, though it comes out smaller than I want. Where are you taking me? Alexander ends his call, and his eyes meet mine in the darkness of the vehicle. And even now, even terrified and angry and overwhelmed, I feel the pull of that gaze, the intensity that makes me feel like the only person in his world. Somewhere safe, he says. My home. Until we neutralize the threat. The words are matter of fact, as if uprooting my entire existence is a simple logistics problem to be solved. My professional life is over, I realize with a sickening clarity that makes my stomach turn. I cannot return to work, cannot go back to my apartment, cannot return to anything familiar, and the job I worked so hard for, the career I sacrificed for, the student loans I will still be paying for the next decade, all of it means nothing now because I talked to a man in a coma and someone decided that made me valuable. Anger surges through the shock like fire through ice. I did not ask for this. My voice is louder now. Edged with fury I have been too scared to feel until this moment. Alexander's expression hardens into something unreadable, his jaw tightening. I did not ask to be shot either, but here we are. His words are cold, almost cruel. A reminder that he did not choose this situation any more than I did. But then his hand finds mine in the darkness of the vehicle, his fingers lacing through mine with surprising gentleness that contradicts the harshness of his tone. I will fix this, Emma, I promise you. The compound we arrive at is massive, all high walls and iron gates and security cameras that track our vehicle as we pass through two separate checkpoints, surrounded by armed security who nod at Alexander with respect that borders on reverence, and I realize this is his kingdom, the seat of his power. The SUV stops in front of a mansion that screams wealth and power, all modern architecture and expensive materials and lighting that makes it look like something from a magazine I would never be able to afford. I am escorted inside by Alexander himself, his hand on the small of my back, possessive and protective. And the interior is even more stunning. All marble and art and furniture that probably costs more than I make in a year. He leads me through hallways that seem to go on forever until we reach a bedroom suite that is larger than my entire apartment, with a bed big enough for 4 people and windows overlooking grounds I cannot fully see in the darkness. Rest, he says, and his voice has gentled again. We will talk in the morning. I want to argue, want to demand answers and explanations and a way out of this nightmare. But exhaustion crashes over me like a wave. The adrenaline that has kept me moving finally draining away and leaving me hollow and shaking, and I can only nod as Alexander leaves and closes the door behind him with a soft click that sounds like a cage locking. I wake disoriented in a bed that feels like sleeping on a cloud, the mattress so different from my lumpy futon at home that for a moment I cannot remember where I am. And then it all crashes back with the weight of a building collapsing, the gunfire, the escape, Alexander's hand gripping mine in the darkness, and I sit up fast enough to make my head spin as morning light streams through floor-to-ceiling windows that must be 15 feet tall, illuminating a bedroom that is larger than my entire apartment and decorated in shades of cream and silver that look like something from a designer showroom. I am still wearing the scrubs I wore to work last night, now wrinkled and carrying the faint smell of hospital antiseptic, and when I stand on shaking legs and walk to the windows, I can see grounds that stretch out like a private park, all manicured lawns and strategic landscaping, and a wall in the distance topped with security cameras that remind me this beautiful place is also a fortress. There is a soft knock on the door and I freeze, my heart jumping into my throat. But a female voice calls out that she is Sophia and may she come in. And when I answer yes, a young woman enters carrying what looks like several shopping bags from stores I have only ever walked past without entering. She introduces herself as Alexander's housekeeper, her smile warm, but her eyes assessing me with the kind of careful evaluation that makes me wonder what she sees. Probably a terrified nurse who has stumbled into a world she does not belong in. And she sets the bags on the bed and explains that she took the liberty of selecting some clothes in my size, and breakfast is ready downstairs whenever I am ready. I want to ask her how she knows my size, how any of this was arranged so quickly. But she is already leaving with another polite smile that does not quite reach her eyes. The clothes she brought are expensive, brands I recognize from magazine advertisements, jeans that probably cost more than my weekly grocery budget, and soft sweaters in colors that would actually look good on me, and undergarments still in their packaging. And I feel strange putting them on, like I am wearing a costume for a role I have not auditioned for. But my scrubs are filthy, and I have nothing else, so I dress in dark jeans and a cream sweater that feels like butter against my skin. I follow the route Sophia took, trying to remember the turns through hallways lined with art that might be original and might be worth more than I will earn in my lifetime, until I find a dining room with a table that could seat 20, but currently holds only Alexander at one end, reading something on a tablet, dressed in tailored black that transforms him completely from the patient I knew in room 707 into the powerful man he truly is, all sharp lines and controlled danger, and an authority that radiates from him like heat. He looks up when I enter and something shifts in his expression, softening just slightly, and he dismisses Sophia with a slight nod and stands to pour coffee from a silver carafe into a cup that probably costs more than my student loan payment, handing it to me directly, and I take it with hands that shake just slightly as I sit across from him at the vast table. "We identified the shooter," he says without preamble, his voice businesslike and cold. "A soldier from the Moretti family. They wanted to finish what they started at the hospital." I wrap my hands around the cup, needing its warmth even though the room is perfectly heated, and I force myself to ask the question that has been burning in my mind since last night. Why did they think killing me would matter? Alexander's jaw tightens, and he sets down his tablet with controlled precision. And when his eyes meet mine, they are dark with something that might be anger or might be guilt. "Because I protected you, Emma. Because I kept you close. Because anyone watching could see that you mattered to me, and in my world that makes you valuable, a piece that can be used for leverage or removed to cause pain." The words settle over me like a heavy blanket, suffocating in their implications, and I understand with brutal clarity that I am not a person in this equation, but a pawn in a game I do not understand, marked as important only because a dangerous man decided I was worth protecting, and the weight of it makes the expensive coffee taste like ash in my mouth. Over the following days, I remain trapped in Alexander's compound, And I use that word deliberately because despite the luxury and the kindness of Sophia and the safety of these walls, I am not free to leave, not free to return to my life, not free to make any choice that does not involve staying here where armed men patrol the grounds and security cameras track every movement. I am safe but isolated, cut off from everything familiar, and my phone was left behind at the hospital, so I cannot even call the few friends I have to tell them I am alive, though Alexander assures me his people have spread word that I am taking emergency family leave, a story that will hold for a while, but not forever. Alexander is frequently absent during the day, disappearing into parts of the mansion I have not been shown, handling business he does not discuss, and I do not ask about, because I am not sure I want to know the details of what a man like him does, what orders he gives, what violence he orchestrates from behind closed doors. But when he is present, usually in the evenings, we fall into patterns that feel familiar from the hospital, the two of us talking in that way we developed when he was recovering, him asking about my life with genuine interest that still surprises me answering more honestly than I probably should, and in these moments I glimpse the man beneath the dangerous exterior, the one who listened to a lonely nurse ramble about student loans and bad coffee. One evening, I cannot stay in my beautiful cage any longer, and I wander through the mansion until I find a terrace overlooking the city, the lights spreading out like fallen stars, and Alexander is standing there alone, hands braced on the stone railing, his shoulders tight with tension I have learned to recognize. I join him silently, standing close enough that our arms almost touch, and for a long moment neither of us speaks, just two people looking out at a world that has become complicated and dangerous. "I am sorry," he says finally, his voice rough in a way that has nothing to do with disuse and everything to do with emotion he rarely shows. "You should never have been involved in this." The words should comfort me, but instead they spark something contrary in my chest, something that has been building over these strange suspended days. I surprise myself when I speak. I do not regret it. Meeting you. Even this. He turns to me and I can see genuine surprise in his dark eyes, as if he cannot fathom why anyone would choose this chaos, this danger, this life. I continue before I lose my nerve. My life was small, Alexander. Safe. Lonely. I went to work and came home and paid bills and existed, and no one saw me. Not really. Not the way you do. He steps closer and I can feel the heat of him, the controlled power that radiates from his body. "Emma," he says, and my name in his voice sounds like something precious. "You do not know what you are saying." But I do. I have had days of isolation to think about nothing else, to examine my feelings from every angle, to acknowledge the truth I have been avoiding. I reach up, my hand trembling slightly, and touch his face, feeling the slight roughness of stubble under my palm, the first time I have initiated contact since he pulled me into that SUV. "Show me who you are," I say. "All of it. Not the version you think I can handle. The real you." Something in Alexander's carefully maintained control fractures, and I see it happen, see the moment he stops holding himself back, and then he is kissing me. But not like that desperate act when he first woke in the hospital, not like a drowning man gasping for air. This is deliberate and consuming and feels like a claiming, like he is marking me as his in a way that should terrify me, but instead makes me feel more alive than I have in years. The kiss deepens, and I feel Alexander's hands frame my face with a tenderness that contradicts the intensity of his mouth on mine, and then he is lifting me, carrying me as though I weigh nothing. Moving from the terrace through glass doors into his bedroom, a space I have never entered, all dark wood and masculine simplicity, and he sets me down on a bed that feels enormous, his body following mine down onto sheets that smell like him, clean and expensive and dangerously compelling. I should be afraid, some rational part of my mind insists. I should be thinking about all the reasons this is reckless and impossible. But instead, I feel more alive than I have in years. Every nerve ending lit up with awareness of his hands sliding under the borrowed sweater, his palms warm against my skin, and he pulls back just enough to look at me with eyes that are black in the dim light. "Are you sure?" he asks, his voice rough, and I can see what it costs him to pause, to give me the choice, and I answer by pulling him back down to me, my hands fisting in his shirt. He undresses me slowly despite the urgency I can feel thrumming through his body, constantly checking my face for hesitation, for doubt. And I realize he is being gentle with me. This dangerous man who commands armies of criminals is treating me like something precious. And when I reach for his clothes, he helps me, shrugging out of the tailored black until I can see all of him. The scars I catalogued in the hospital now revealed in context. A map of violence survived, and I trace them with trembling fingers, while he watches me with an intensity that makes my breath catch. What follows is inevitable and consuming, his hands learning my body while I learn his, and he moves with controlled power that becomes something more when I whisper his name, something raw and almost desperate, and I answer with my body, with my hands, with my mouth, saying yes to everything he is offering, everything he is. Afterward, I lie wrapped in sheets that probably cost more than my monthly rent, my head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat slow, and the silence stretches between us until Alexander begins to talk, his voice quiet in the darkness, telling me things I sense he has never told anyone. He tells me about a childhood spent watching his father build an empire on blood and fear, about being 12 years old when he first understood what his last name meant, about the aunt who tried to shield him until she was killed for that kindness, about his calculated rise to power after his father was murdered, about the enemies he has made and the violence he has orchestrated, and the blood that stains his hands so thoroughly it will never wash clean. He gives me truth, raw and unflinching, expecting me to recoil, to finally see him clearly and run. But instead, I trace the scar on his chest, the one from the recent shooting, the one that brought him to room 707 and into my life. "I see you," I tell him, my voice steady despite everything I have just learned. The man who listened to a lonely nurse talk about nothing. The man who protected me when he did not have to. He captures my hand, pressing it flat against his heart. "I cannot give you a normal life, Emma," he says, and I can hear the warning in his words, the last chance he is offering me to escape. I meet his eyes in the darkness, and I speak a truth I have only just acknowledged to myself. "I do not want normal," I say. "I want you." It is reckless, impossible, foolish, but I mean it with every part of myself. And Alexander pulls me close, his arms banding around me with fierce possession, and for the first time since I have known him, I see fear in his dark eyes, not fear of his enemies or violence or death, but fear of losing me, of this fragile, impossible thing between us being destroyed, and I kiss him again to chase that fear away. The next morning I wake to find Alexander already dressed, standing by the window with his phone pressed to his ear, his voice low and controlled in a way that tells me he is speaking to someone important, and when he ends the call and turns to me, his expression is unreadable, all the vulnerability from last night locked away behind the mask of the crime boss. "James is coming," he says. James Harcourt, his second in command, a man I have seen twice in passing, always watching everything with calculating eyes. He has news about the Morettis. I sit up, pulling the sheet around myself, suddenly aware of how exposed I am in every possible way, and within 20 minutes I am dressed in borrowed clothes again and standing beside Alexander in his study, a room I have not entered before, all dark leather and walls lined with books that look actually read, and James arrives precisely on time, nodding to Alexander before his gaze flicks to me with an assessment that makes me feel like a problem to be solved. "The Moretti family has reached out through intermediaries," James says without preamble. "They are willing to negotiate. They want the territory on the east side that we took from them last year, and in exchange they will declare the hospital incident closed, no further retaliation, and the girl gets declared off limits across all families." The girl. As if I am not standing right here. Alexander's response is immediate and cold. No, I do not negotiate with people who threaten what is mine. James does not look surprised. They are offering favorable terms. We can afford to give back that territory. It would prevent a war. Alexander's jaw tightens, and I can see the predator rising in him, the man who built his power on never showing weakness, never backing down. What if I want you to negotiate? I hear myself say, and both men turn to look at me as if they had forgotten I could speak. Alexander stares at me, and I see something dangerous flash in his dark eyes. Emma. His voice holds a warning, but I stand my ground, surprising myself with my own boldness. I do not want you starting a war over me, killing people because they threatened your nurse. His expression darkens in a way that makes James take a subtle step back. You do not understand, Alexander says, and each word is precisely controlled. If I show weakness, if I compromise because of you, every enemy I have will see it, and they will target you to exploit it. Do you understand what that means? I meet his eyes and refuse to flinch. Then teach me. Teach me how to survive in your world. Do not lock me away like something fragile that will break at the first real threat. Alexander studies me for a long moment, and I can see him reassessing, seeing something in me he did not expect, and finally he turns to James. Give us the room. James leaves without argument, and Alexander moves closer to me, his hands framing my face. You do not know what you are asking, but I think I do. I am asking to be more than a weakness you have to protect. I am asking to understand the rules of this world so I can navigate it. I am asking you to trust me. Something shifts in his expression, and over the following hours, he begins my education, spreading maps and organizational charts across his desk, explaining power structures and alliances with the same patient attention he gave to my stories about nursing school. The 5 families that control the city, the neutral zones where violence is forbidden, the code that governs disputes, the territories and the revenue streams and the complex web of loyalty and blood debt that holds it all together. I am a fast learner. I always have been. And I realize this world has rules, brutal and unforgiving but clear, and if I understand them, I can survive in them. Maybe even carve out a place for myself. That evening, Alexander takes me to a meeting with his inner circle, 6 men who have served him for years, and he introduces me not as a guest or a woman under temporary protection, but as someone who falls under his personal aegis, and the message is unmistakably clear to everyone in that room. She is mine. Anyone who touches her answers to me. The meeting takes place in neutral territory, a private room in a restaurant that serves as a demilitarized zone where the 5 families conduct business without bloodshed. And I sit beside Alexander at a polished table that reflects the dim light from overhead fixtures, silent as instructed, but watching everything. Learning the language of power that plays out in posture and tone, and the careful way words are chosen. Across from us sit 3 representatives of the Moretti family, older men with hard eyes who assess Alexander with the wariness of predators circling each other, and the negotiations unfold with a precision that reminds me of surgery, each side probing for weakness, offering concessions calculated to appear generous while giving away nothing essential. Alexander is magnificent to watch, his voice calm and controlled, his body language projecting absolute confidence. And I understand now why he leads, why men follow him, because he wields power like a scalpel, knowing exactly where to cut and when to suture. The Morettis want the East Side territory they lost, 6 blocks of commercial real estate that generate steady revenue, and in exchange they offer peace, a formal end to hostilities, and a declaration that I am sacrosanct, untouchable across all families bound by the accords that govern this hidden world. Alexander makes them wait for his answer, letting silence stretch until the tension in the room becomes almost unbearable. And then he names his terms. He will cede the territory, but he wants guarantees, blood oaths, from each of the 5 families that any violation of my protected status will be considered an act of war, not just against him, but against the Accords themselves, turning me from a weakness into a symbol of the code they all claim to honor. It is brilliant and ruthless, transforming a compromise into a demonstration of strength. And I watch the Moretti representatives calculate whether they are being outmaneuvered before the eldest nods slowly. Agreement reached. The formal declarations are made, old rituals in Italian and English, words that carry weight in this world, and I am declared under the protection of Alexander Sinclair, and by extension under the protection of the Accords, which means my death would destabilize the entire power structure, making me simultaneously safer and more symbolically valuable than I ever imagined possible. When we leave the restaurant, I am shaking with adrenaline, and Alexander's hand finds the small of my back, steadying me, proprietary. "You did well," he says quietly, and I realize I have passed some test I did not know I was taking. Back at the compound, alone in his study with the door closed and his security stationed outside, I finally let myself process what just happened, how my life has been bargained over and restructured and bound into frameworks I barely understand, and Alexander watches me with that intense focus that still makes my breath catch. "Are you all right?" he asks, and I surprise myself by laughing, a slightly wild sound. I just became a political asset in a criminal empire. I think all right is relative. He moves closer, and I can see concern in his dark eyes beneath the control. "Say the word, and I will find another way. I will send you somewhere safe, give you a new identity, money to start over. You can still walk away from this." But I shake my head because I understand now what he is offering and what it would cost, how it would look like weakness, how it would unravel the careful architecture of the agreement. And more than that, I do not want to leave. Instead of answering with words, I ask him the question that has been forming since the meeting ended. "Teach me to shoot." Alexander goes very still, and then he laughs, genuine surprised delight transforming his face into something younger and less guarded. "You are serious, completely serious. If I am staying in your world, if I am going to be a symbol of your power, then I need to know how to protect myself. I need to be more than something fragile you keep locked away." He studies me for a long moment, and then nods slowly. "If you stay, you learn everything. How to handle a weapon, how to read a room, how to see threats before they materialize. You become a partner, not a possession." "Yes," I say, and the word feels like a vow. Over the following weeks I learn, and the education is intensive and exhausting and exhilarating in ways I never expected. Alexander teaches me to shoot in the private range beneath the compound, his hands correcting my stance, his voice patient as he explains sight alignment and trigger discipline and breath control.